Welcome, everyone, to the June 6, 2025, the less full Grassley episode of On Iowa Politics. This week on the podcast, the Iowa DOGE Task Force pitches fewer Iowa counties, and we have two more candidates for governor, one from each political side, a candidate for the U.S. Senate, and a statehouse candidate with a connection to said Senate campaign. Hey, everyone, I'm Erin Murphy, the Des Moines Bureau Chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. With me this week, our Gazette Deputy Bureau Chief, Tom Barton. Hello, Tom.
Hello.
We have Lead Des Moines Bureau Chief, Marchel Hoff. Hello, Maya.
Hey, Erin.
And Sarah Watson of the Quad City Times is with us. Hello, Sarah.
Greetings, Erin.
All right, so a bunch of candidate announcements to get to this week, as I said. But before we do that, let's start with the second meeting of the Iowa DOGE Task Force, created by Governor Kim Reynolds to explore ways to make for more efficient government in Iowa at all levels. This week, the task force held the second of its 4 scheduled meetings, and the group floated one particularly eye-catching recommendation. Maya, tell us about it.
Yeah, you kind of already mentioned it in the intro, but the recommendation out of all of the ones that were thrown out was consolidating Iowa's 99 counties. This was during a DOGE task force, a task force that Reynolds established back in February through executive order, and it's made up of 15. It used to be 16, but now 15 members that include Iowa business leaders from elected office, education, and they're tasked with finding ways to make the state government more efficient and producing recommendations for Reynolds and lawmakers to consider by the end of their 4 meetings, which is when they will present their recommendations to the governor and the legislature. The task force is named similarly to the Federal Department of Government Efficiency created by President Donald Trump and formerly headed, I guess. I haven't really been. I know that they're not on great terms at the moment. I don't know.
Haven't been online today, then?
Oh, geez.
we're taping this Thursday afternoon, and I am going to say fairly confidently, Maya, that you haven't been on Twitter much this afternoon.
Okay. Well, side note, don't know what's going on with that, but it's named. That's the gist. And so this was the second of the 4 meetings that the group is going to hold. And during the first meeting, which we didn't get great advance notice of, or any really advanced notice. Technically, they did post the meeting on the DOGE website, but we just didn't catch that. So we weren't able to actually attend the first meeting. But according to materials that were presented to us after, they kind of divvied up tasks and ways that they want to tackle making the government more efficient, streamlining government services into 3 different areas, including workforce, return on taxpayer investment, and technology. So the biggest thing that was mentioned was that, the return on taxpayer investments, and in that group are a lot of recommendations, including that county consolidation. So the kind of head of that committee, because they were given heads, Terry Lutz of McClure Engineering in Ankeny, he said that the counties, when they were established almost, I think, 179 years ago, that's what he said. That's the
it's in that ballpark, whatever the exact number. Many moons ago. Yeah.
Right. The counties were designed to make it easier for people when they were traveling by horse and buggy. They were just, a lot of the chairs of those counties are in the center of that, so it just made it more efficient for people to be able to travel and make it closer by. But now he says we're not living in a time of horses and buggies anymore, and he said that they're considering consolidating these counties and rather being able to regionalize services. He listed a couple different examples of where Iowa has regionalized government services, like through regional shared services, including judicial districts, highway patrol districts, and mental health districts. And so that was pretty interesting. Again, this is the recommendation stage, or I guess the proposal stage. Between now and August, they're going to do more research, talk to stakeholders, is what they said, about these proposals and see how feasible they are. And then they'll bring that to the August meeting. And then in September, they'll give these recommendations to the governor. And, the chair of the task force, Emily Schmidt of Suck-Up Manufacturing, who Reynolds appointed to as the task force chair, she told reporters after that, where some ideas that are proposed in this meeting may not make it to the recommendation phase. They're just going to do research and see what should move forward. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to recommend consolidating the 99 counties for sure. It was just something that was thrown out there. Within that, under the return on taxpayer investment section, they also kind of threw out there, floated creating opportunities for portions of teacher pay to be merit-based, consolidating rural school districts as, populations in the least populated areas of Iowa and in rural Iowa continue to decline, and benchmarking government employee health and retirement benefits to those in the private sector, to make sure that the government can compete and recruit and retain government employees that may want to take private sector jobs because their wages and benefits are more competitive. And then just to hit on just one other thing, they also laid out some workforce recommendations and highlighted some areas under there, which includes closing skill gaps in specific sectors like manufacturing, skilled trades, and healthcare, and simplifying the workforce training program. So they're just kind of in the planning phase. And then there were also recommendations for technology. So, which is basically focusing on streamlining government IT systems, modernizing them, and utilizing technology more. So,
yeah. And we'll obviously be following that committee all the way through its process to where the recommendations are formal and final this fall. But in the meantime, Maya, I want to talk just quick a little bit more about this county consolidation thing, because it is something that has been out there before. It doesn't usually stick around very long, and it's just fascinating because politically speaking, it's such a difficult thing to do. And even if you get enough, and look, objectively, like I was promoting Maya's story in the newsletter this morning, and I kind of got curious myself, and I looked it up. Iowa's 99 counties are the 9th most in any U.S. state, and that's even though Iowa is the 26th largest geographically and the 31st largest population-wise. So we have way more counties comparatively speaking to other states that are larger, both population and geographically. So there's clearly a fair discussion to be had there, and Maya noted the historical reasons too, that these were established at a much different time. But it's you get enough people in a room, and even if someone agrees that this is a worthwhile cause, and you say to them, okay, it's going to be your county seat that's no longer the county seat and loses the courthouse. Hey, whoa.
right.
So it's going to be fascinating to see if it even ultimately makes it into the recommendations, and B, if anybody else, if legislators even pay a morsel of attention to that. If it does, did anybody talk about that at all, Maya? The kind of the fraught political discussion that comes around that?
No. So the meeting, it was scheduled to be an hour and a half. It ended up being 40 minutes, and a lot of it just seemed kind of, I don't want to say like scripted, but it was definitely like the only people that really spoke were the team heads of each team that was designated, and then Schmidt talked, but no one else at the table. It wasn't really a discussion. It was just saying, oh, this is what this team came up. This is what this team came up with, and then that was pretty much it. One thing that I forgot to mention was property taxes. I know that 2 weeks ago on Iowa Press, Reynolds mentioned that, in talking about property taxes and how that's going to be one of her priorities next session, and how the legislature wasn't able to get a any legislation regarding property taxes to her desk last session. She said she's going to ask the DOGE committee to take a look at it and see if there's any way that could fit into their recommendations or their role in this. And Lutz said that property taxes were the elephant in the room, but they didn't really bring up any specific property tax related proposals or solutions. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Not saying that they won't, but yeah.
Right. Okay. Next meeting in July, is that right?
August.
For that, August. Okay. All right. So obviously we'll stay with that task force committee and see where those discussions and recommendations ultimately wind up. Let's get on now with Candidate Palooza. And we're going to start in Iowa's U.S. Senate election, where we got a Democratic candidate early this week, a Democrat from Western Iowa. We were going to have our Jared McNett talk about it because he broke the story, but unfortunately Jared's a little under the weather this afternoon, so playing the role of Jared McNett for the time being is going to be Tom Barton. Tom, we talked to, it's J.D. Schulten, and we talked to Representative Schulten during the legislative session about this, and at that time he had said that he was thinking about it, so he has decided to pull the trigger now. What more should we know about J.D. Schulten?
So, and again, as you mentioned, this was the news was broken by Jared McNett. So, in Jared's story and his conversation with Representative Schulten, the Democrat from Sioux City talked about how he had been thinking about making this announcement for a while, and was still kind of mulling that over, and then come Senator Joni Ernst's comments at the town hall in Parkersburg last week over concerns about cuts to Medicaid, and her famous line that's now gone viral, the dismissive comment saying, well, we're all going to die. And so it was her comments with regard to the Medicaid cuts where Representative Schulten felt like he's got to do something, felt like now is the time to jump in and make an announcement, saying that he felt that Senator Ernst's comment to those concerns about changes to Medicaid eligibility and Medicaid funding under Trump's big, beautiful bill were kind of cold and callous, and that that kind of pushed him over the edge, so to speak, to make this announcement and announce that he is going to make a bid to potentially unseat the Republican incumbent. So anyway, he called those comments unacceptable, and at the end of the day felt that the people of Iowa deserve better, and that in his mind or his estimation that there's nothing worse that you could do than cut Medicaid and SNAP food assistance benefits that everyday Iowans rely on to instead provide tax breaks that, in his view, and a lot of Democrats argue, benefit primarily the most wealthy Americans. So he feels that the state of Iowa has kind of lost faith in Joni Ernst in the wake of those comments and the national backlash that has come about from that. For those who are unaware, J.D. Schulten represents a Sioux City district. Correct me if I'm wrong. A district that overwhelmingly, I believe, went for Trump. Representing an area of the state where he outperformed for a Democrat. Part of that, I believe, was cited in election forecaster Sabato's crystal ball changing their ratings forecast for that U.S. Senate race. They had rated it a safe Republican seat, and then changed that rating to lean Republican, I believe.
Yes, correct. From safe to likely.
Safe to lightly.
Yep.
My bad.
Yep.
I'm conflating Sabato's with I think the Cook political report.
Yeah, can't tell your forecaster without a program. Yeah.
I know, right. And so anyway, in the write-up that they had about the reason for the ratings shift, they, talk about, aside from Ernst now having a credible opponent, with J.D. Schulten throwing his cap in the ring, they talked that Ernst could face a more challenging environment than she faced in her last reelection back in 2020. Well, I guess could face a challenging environment than either of her previous two elections, and saying that it's possible that 2026 could be like 2018. Iowa didn't have a Senate election that year, but Democrats did up winning 3 of the state's 4 U.S. House seats that year. And Sabato saying that it expects that with the Senate election, that if Iowa had a Senate election, that it likely at least would have been close.
Yeah. Yep. And I couldn't find, in a really quick on the spot fact check here, Tom, about the House district. I do know, speaking of 2018, that he obviously ran well ahead there against what Hillary Clinton did in 2016.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the comparison over the 4th district or just the House. But regardless, the point stands that he has done well in a very conservative area of the state, especially compared to other Democrats higher up the ticket.
Yeah, so I'm looking now at the write-up from Sabato's, and it talks about in Iowa's very conservative 4th district.
Yeah.
It's talking about how back in 2018, again, in Iowa's very conservative 4th congressional district, he came within about 3 points of ousting former Representative Steve King, kind of a far-right provocateur who seemed to who has kind of some white nationalist sympathies, and then tried again in 2020. While Schulten lost the general election by a much larger 24 points, he still did a little bit better than Joe Biden in the district.
There it is.
And then in 22, Schulten ran for the legislature, and again, when it was unopposed for that district covering Sioux City. And then last year had a competitive race and won re-election by 7 points. Yep. In a district that backed Trump, here's what I was trying to get out. In a district that backed Trump, 51-48.
There you go. There's the one. So it was both. It was the 4th district and the House district. Yeah. Excellent. All right. Very good. And Ernst, by the way, I'll add, has not yet said officially whether she's running for re-election next year, although her campaign this week announced that it has hired a campaign manager. So that seems to be a signal that she's pretty seriously thinking about it, but I suppose that could still change, and we'll see and wait for the official word. I noted when her annual Roast and Ride fundraiser was announced for later this fall, that at this same point in the last time she was up for re-election, that was where she made that announcement at her Roast and Ride event in 2019. That would be. So we'll see if she holds off until then for that one again. Moving on, we have a new statehouse candidate who we probably wouldn't normally talk about on the podcast. There's 150 seats in the Iowa legislature. We don't have time to talk about every candidate for the Iowa State House, but this one has some ties to a major story that we talked about last week and just talked about again. Tom, you covered this. I want you to tell us about India May, who was running for the Iowa House in District 58, which is Chickasaw, Bramer, and Floyd counties, that area. What's unique? Why are we bringing her up, Tom?
Because this is the woman that sparked, I guess, the now famous exchange with Joni Ernst at that Parkersburg town hall that, led to that viral moment and that heated exchange. So she was the person that interrupted Senator Ernst while Ernst was answering a question related to Medicaid cuts. She was the person in the crowd who yelled out, "People will die," which then led to Ernst's response again that now is famous and viral with the senator saying, well, we all are going to die. So India May, a Northeast Iowa library director and a registered nurse, has said that has announced on social media that she intends to run as a progressive Democrat for Iowa House District 58. That's the district currently represented by Republican incumbent State Representative Charlie Thompson of Charles City. And as you mentioned, that district includes all of Chickasaw County and then portions of Bremer and Floyd counties. So I reached out to India May, wasn't able to get a hold of her, didn't return my message, but in her Facebook post, she says that she attended Ernst Town Hall Friday in Parkersburg, where she said that she was overwhelmed by what she viewed to be as repeated lies and dismissals by Senator Ernst of the real concerns about food insecurity, and losing health care under Trump's big, beautiful bill that led her to that outburst to shouting, "People will die." She says on her campaign website and on the Act Blue online fundraising platform that she's running for the Iowa House seat to protect public education, improve healthcare access and quality of life, and to stop what she sees or views as attacks to schools, libraries, and services for the poor. Her website states that her campaign is focused on listening to Iowans, standing up to special interests that she doesn't feel represents the district, and defending vulnerable people's rights, revitalizing Iowa's schools, supporting farmers, and promoting timely, affordable, and accessible health care for all.
All right, very good. Our other new candidates this week came in Iowa's open seat election for governor. Early in the week, we got the announcement of Julie Stauch, who is a West Des Moines consultant and campaign veteran. And then midweek, we got the announcement of Eddie Andrews, a Republican state lawmaker from Johnston. Julie is a Democrat, by the way. I don't think I snuck that word in there. Our Todd Dorman isn't available to kind of give his analysis of these folks. So I covered both of their announcements. So I'll just maybe fill in some quick biographical information, and we can talk in future episodes about what Todd and maybe others involved in the podcast think of these candidates' chances. But Julie Stauch is probably, if you're in all Iowa politics follower, they're most likely to remember her from two campaigns in particular. In 2022, she was the campaign manager for Iowa's Democratic U.S. Senate candidate Mike Franken, who ran unsuccessfully against Chuck Grassley that year. And then prior to that, she, and I'm trying to remember the official title now, and it's escaping me, but she was a member of Pete Buttigieg's Iowa caucus campaign in the 2020 cycle. Julie has jumped in. Obviously, that is the primary where Rob Sand already exists and already has raised millions and millions of dollars. I asked Julie about that. You can see her response to that challenge that she'll face in my story. But it's interesting, and at the very least, we for sure have a Democratic primary. People are free to surmise how competitive that may be, at least looking at things as they start here with the resource difference that's likely to be there. But we wondered if Rob Sand's money will have cleared the field, and technically speaking, it has not. So we will have a Democratic primary for governor, at least for the time being. And then Eddie Andrews had a campaign kickoff event this week at the Iowa Capitol, just outside the Iowa Capitol, and announced his candidacy. Eddie, again, is from a state lawmaker from Johnston, has an interesting political kind of election resume that he can offer, in that he's now 3 times won what is a pretty competitive statehouse district in the suburbs here in Johnston. And in fact, it's one half of the Senate district that flipped in this last election, with a Democrat beating the incumbent Republican, but Eddie Andrews held on to his seat within that Senate district in a very close election. His next door neighbor is a Democrat as well. So he's proven to be able to win elections against sort of tough partisan headwinds where he is as well. Obviously, similar to Julie Stauch, Eddie Andrews' challenges early on will be name recognition, widespread recognition, raising resources to be able to introduce himself to Iowa voters who don't know him outside of Johnston or the Des Moines metro, especially when you already have a congressman in the primary. And from what we've heard, just waiting for the official word, very likely a statewide elected official in Brenna Bird, who at the very least is thinking about it. And we assume she's going to run, but we'll see. Anyways, those people will have a lot earlier name recognition than Eddie Andrews, and that'll be his challenge. And we'll talk about those folks in future episodes. Lastly, this week, it was referred to earlier. Everybody's talking about the big, beautiful bill, and Senator Chuck Grassley took his turn this week in an interview with our very own Sarah Watson. And it's especially timely because now that the bill's passed the House, it's in the Senate's hands. So it's on Senator Grassley's desk, so to speak. Sarah, what did he have to say about the big, beautiful bill?
Yeah, so Senator Grassley said that negotiations are starting and that they're hoping to get a bill to the president by the 4th of July. He said he thinks it'll be similar to what passed the House of Representatives, but not exactly the same. He had said actually last week on this Capitol Hill report that he does just about every week with a couple different reporters from around the state. He said last week that he would put himself in the category of, quote, people that say we aren't cutting enough through the spending bill. So he would like to see some more spending cuts, but he said he's not going to be so adamant about it that he will say the bill shouldn't pass the way it is. So he said he would appreciate some further changes on biofuels, taking away parts of the Inflation Reduction Act and other reduced spending. Of course, there are, some folks on the other side that say, even on the Republicans, that say it cuts too much. So, and it only passed the House by a one vote margin. So Grassley, told us that has to be taken into consideration too, that it has to go back to the House and pass, and it passed by only a 1 vote margin. He said if there were to be any changes, he doesn't want to see any changes to the reauthorizing the 2017 tax cuts. He wants to keep those the way it is in the bill. I just thought this is all interesting because we've had a couple of senators that have visited Iowa in the past week or so. Senator Rick Scott of Florida and Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky that have both said they're going to hold out to see a bill with further cuts in the House bill delivered. And so it sounds like, Chuck Grassley's not in that camp, but is at least saying that he'd like to maybe see some more cuts. He's not opposed to further cuts either. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of really competing interests for this bill that will be interesting to play out.
Yeah, that will be fascinating. Senator raises a very good point that the bill barely passed the House as it is. Just barely had enough Republicans as it was. If you change it too much, you risk losing even that support, and then it doesn't pass the House when you send it back. But it does sound like, based on, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but it sounds like based on what I heard from you via the senator, that there's not much danger of him being a no in the Senate on this bill. Is that fair to say? He's sounds like a pretty safe yes.
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, we'll keep an eye on that vote as well and talk about that in future episodes of On Iowa Politics. I think that's going to do it for this episode. If you're not already, please subscribe to us on your streaming service of choice or at YouTube, where you can also smash that like button and spread the word. You can also find the podcast each and every week on your preferred Gazette or Lee newspaper website. And now that you've listened to the On Iowa Politics podcast, make sure you're also subscribed to the On Iowa Politics newsletter, where every morning in your inbox you'll receive all the latest politics and government coverage from our team. You can subscribe to that free newsletter at the Gazette's website, thegazette.com. And lastly, don't forget that the work of everyone you heard here today can be found on the pages of websites of the Quad City Times, Muscatine Journal, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Guadalupe Cedar Falls Courier, Mason City Globe Gazette, Council Bluffs Daily Nonpareil, and the Sioux City Journal. Before we go out, real quick, a happy birthday to our podcaster, Marchel Hoff, who just celebrated this past weekend. Got a little quality time back up in Minnesota, right, Maya?
Yes, even though there was a ton of wildfire smoke, it was still really nice.
I haven't heard you hacking or using the cough button very much, so you must be okay, right?
Oh, I'm fine.
Okay, good.
Even though my lungs are aging, they're still here. So.
Okay, all right. Calm down there. All right, for everybody here, Tom Barton, Maya Marchel, Hoff, Sarah Watson, and our producer Bailey Chehan, I'm the old one, Erin Murphy. Be well, everyone, and be good.